Hey, thanks for joining us today on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We appreciate everyone jumping on to Hail Trace today to talk about Tropical Storm Francine. Tropical Storm Francine has definitely been a little bit more impressive over the next day or two. And now today, the National Hurricane Center saying this is a tropical storm. This is the first named storm in 20 days, I think. It's been a very quiet 3 weeks across the Atlantic and the Gulf. And now we officially have Tropical Storm Francine. So I'm meteorologist Taylor Cox with Hail Trace, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm sure you know Derek Klein, our CEO. We're going to go through some of the different models that we have, forecast for Francine over the next few minutes. But if you do have any questions in the meantime, we'd love to answer your questions. So go ahead and stick those in the comments section, and we can get to those in just a few minutes. But for now, I'm going to hand it off to Derek, who let me share your screen, Derek, if you're ready for that. And you can just kind of tell us what you see from this over the last few days, few hours. What have you seen from this? And what do you expect to see over the next 36 hours?
Well, Taylor, it surprisingly has gotten its structure together really, really quickly today. So I've actually been in and out of meetings all day long, and came over just to kind of get an update before we started this. And it's the cloud pattern. Everything about this tropical system says I'm going to rapidly intensify, and I wouldn't be shocked if the landfall intensity is maybe even being a little bit underdone. We'll see if this intensification continues. There is a plane, so I'm going to show you that first. We'll just start with that. Let's see if I can find it here. Here it is. So this was the flight that went into Francine earlier today and found that it was intensifying a little bit faster. So you can see right here, like if I click on this, so we've got 996 millibars. So the pressure had dropped quite a bit. Here's where that higher wind was in the northwest quadrant, which is where we'd expect in a well-defined tropical system. And you can see how quickly it actually really got its act together. So the tropical storm they had flown through two different times. So right here, where they really kind of struggled to find good pressure, and then right up here. And again, you can see how light the winds were, and how really just kind of the curvature wasn't the same. And then as they went through it this third time here, just was going crazy at that point. So really just in a matter of time, it really kind of organized itself, its core, and you can see it on satellite here. So as we switch back over, you can see how it's kind of obscured in cloud cover, but you can see the banding underneath here really starting to kind of pull together. These thunderstorms here on the north side really firing, and these will get pulled into the center as we go forward. And that's probably the one thing that I would say is maybe a little bit lacking on this system. So if it's missing anything right now, it's these really, really tall, really, really cold tops of these thunderstorm clouds are really kind of off to the north of the system, of the core itself. Now we do have convection firing around the core, but it's not dead center. And so we're going to, in order for this to really, really intensify into a powerful hurricane, these cold, strong thunderstorms are going to have to pull and wrap into the center of it. But conditions are favorable for that to happen. And so, as we were watching this yesterday, it didn't really have a center low pressure to it. So it was more of like a trough. So it was real elongated, and now everything is centered into one spot. So everything is centered into this location, which will allow it to intensify as it taps into. We'll look at a few different things here.
I wanted to pause you right there. I think that was something that people were talking about is, we've got the winds for this tropical storm. Tropical storm, I think, is 39 mile an hour winds to 74. I think that's right.
Yes.
Sustained wind speeds. We had the winds for this. You could see that structure was trying to form with this, but a lot of people asked, why are we not naming this tropical storm yet or upgrading it to a tropical storm? And I think that's exactly why the National Hurricane Center waited until it had that circular formation to eventually, now we're kind of starting to see an eye form there. And that's why we didn't see that upgrade until this morning, whenever we finally started to see more organization with this.
Yeah, and you could see it, as the plane fly. Now, it was already a tropical storm when the plane went out there to fly through it. Here, find all my different tabs. But you can see right here, it's I mean, so you can see how the wind is kind of spinning around the low here. So it had that spin to it at this point, but look how much more well defined it is when the plane flew through the second time up here. I mean, it was night and day the amount of organization that happened in probably an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah.
Compared to what it was. And so, and essentially this morning is when we went from what we call an elongated trough. So it was just it's an open wave. So it's not essentially the circular pattern to the wind didn't go from the surface to the top. So it was only so there was a low pressure, but it was only surface based or maybe even up at the top, but not at the surface. And so we had to get through all layers of the atmosphere. We had to get that rotation to align itself. Now, the sign of a really, really good tropical cyclone is so sometimes that can tilt. So you can have the rotation, but it tilts. And so a really good one will stand straight up and down like that. And it looks like this has probably done that to some extent now, especially looking at some of the cloud pattern here. So what you can see is the low levels are these big, deep convection clouds right here. Those are in the low levels. But then in the upper levels, this is this kind of streaking looking cloud that's being pulled around. But everything seems to be, for the most, from what I can tell, is aligning on this same spot right here in the center. And so it appears to be stacked very well. It's going to, like I said, it's got to take these thunderstorms here and pull them all the way around into the center. We'll watch to see if more thunderstorms fire right here in this bandage right here. And so that'll be the two things that we'll watch this evening. And a lot of times you will see the convection really increase as we go into the evening and overnight hours on these systems, kind of like thunderstorms in the plains. Sometimes in the evening hours, it just seeds everything and they just kind of take off a little bit in the overnight. And then again, especially in the early morning hours. So we'll see if that happens tonight. And if it does so, does it do so around the center? If it does so, then we'll see continued intensification and potentially at a fairly rapid pace.
Yeah, well, and I think that's something that we're really going to have to watch for, is that the National Hurricane Center actually just tweeted few minutes ago, not very long ago, that Francine is becoming better organized than they initially thought. So I'm thinking that that could definitely be an option for us to see that this rapid intensification happening over the next 12 to 24 hours. So I think that's something that we've got to be watching for. I think right now they have it coming in as a hurricane into Louisiana, but what rating is that? What type of, or what category is that? What type of hazards are going to be associated with that, I think, are some of the bigger questions that we're going to get more details on in the next 12 to 24 hours here.
Yeah, exactly. And so kind of what we're going to watch for now is now that it's got a central core. So now we need to just look at the rest of the atmosphere that it's going to dabble in, if you will. So one of the pieces is obviously is the water, and everybody's talked about the warm waters in the Gulf, and I've got that here. Here we go. So you can see right now, I mean, just parked over really the hottest waters in all of the ocean, with 31 to 33 degrees Celsius water tip. So that's like, I mean, it's bath water, basically. And as you can tell, that goes all the way up. There's a little bit of cooler water right here on the shelf, which is still not cold, but it's cooler than some of the other areas around it. Some of this may sound kind of interesting, but there's been a ton of rain over the last week across Louisiana from what was Invest 91, I believe, or Invest 90 maybe, where we had a little bit of a low pressure on a frontal system that thought it might form into something. It didn't, but it just rained, and it's actually cooled off the water here right on the shelf. So that could affect things a little bit. It's obviously really close to the coast, so I don't think it'll have time to really impact it. So overall, really, really warm waters. So the second thing that we need to look at is, does the system have good structure? And we see that on satellite. We've looked at that. The structure's there. So then the next thing that I like to look at is the amount of shear that's in the atmosphere. So you can see right here we have Francine, and these blue areas, these blue and green areas are low shear, and then the red area is actually really high shear. And this map also talks about over the last 24 hours, how much of a decrease or increase in shear have we seen. And so what I notice is down here in the Gulf, the dotted blue lines tell me that the shear has decreased by up to 20 knots, down to almost zero. And then up here across the southeast, you can see this is almost like a jet streak that's actually pulling away from the system. So I think we'll see some weakening of the shear as it gets closer to Louisiana and the Texas coast. Just a little bit. It's not going to be a ton, but it will be a little bit. And then it does encounter a little bit stronger shear as it gets closer to the coast of Louisiana. So again, the cooler water on the coast and the shear could either cause the strengthening to kind of put a lid to it. And I think you actually see that in the forecast. I haven't looked at the exact numbers, but if I look at, so this is the discussion that was put out by the National Hurricane Center. I haven't actually read it. But yeah, so you see here, so it hasn't made landfall, but notice the last 12 hours, it doesn't really intensify any. So it goes up to a Cat 2 100-mile-per-hour hurricane, and then it kind of stops. And that's because it's encountering this wind shear up here near the coast. And then also potentially just that little bit cooler water. So between those two things, it could stop it. Now, again, this is weather we're talking about. So I'll give you another great example of a hurricane that was forecast to do the same thing and did not do the same thing, and that's Hurricane Ian. As it came into the coast of Florida, we anticipated that it would encounter some higher shear. That was to the north from a frontal boundary, just like this. And as it turned to the right into that shear, it actually intensified and rapidly intensified. So all things that we'll have to watch. We'll definitely want to monitor it. I personally think it's probably going to be a little bit stronger than what they're forecasting. But I think a lot of that's going to occur over the next 24 hours. And then I think you'll have kind of a level off for 24 hours and then a landfall.
Yeah. And that Hurricane Ian, very historic Category 5 hurricane, I think very, very impressive case study there. But yeah, so what we're watching for here is obviously at landfall what happens. But I think you made a great point earlier with all of that rain that we've gotten across Texas and Louisiana the last 3, 4, 5 days. We've seen rain just consistently for almost a week now. And what that does is it saturates the soil. So now the soil is completely saturated. Whenever you get additional rainfall, where does it go? Because the soil is saturated, there's not a lot of other places for it to go. So I think flooding will be an issue, but then you add in the wind to that as well. You're going to see trees more likely to topple a lot easier than they would maybe a month or two ago whenever we were in some drier conditions. So I think that the power outages is going to be a really interesting thing. Doesn't matter what category hurricane we have here, but the power outages are going to be a little bit higher because of all that rain that we've gotten over the last few days. Those trees are going to topple on power lines, on roofs. You're going to see more impacts in that area because of the rain that we've gotten over the last few days.
For sure. And so, and the way you'll see the impact. So there's a pretty significant difference between a low end Cat 1 and a decent Cat 2, maybe even approaching Cat 3 hurricane. It's pretty significant, honestly. But yeah, they've, this area where the landfall, they received 5 to 10 inches of rain, a lot of places, last week. Now it's also swampland. So it's fairly saturated normally, but there's a lot of trees, especially as you get into some of these areas that the landfall. I'm actually going to do I'm going to share a different screen here real quick, which will be more of a radar. Hopefully, if I can make it work here. Yep, here we go. Okay, so this is a current radar loop of the hurricane, but if we go up here to the north, where we anticipate landfall is going to be somewhere right in here. right? So right now, that's the forecasted landfall location. So we're talking about areas like Baton Rouge or Lafayette, Baton Rouge. Um, this whole area right in here is fairly populated. So as this hurricane kind of comes up and makes, landfall, drawing faces here, it looks like, but as it comes up and makes a landfall right into this area, New Iberia, Homa, all these areas, again, if you zoom in here, all this dark green, there's lots of trees and all kinds of stuff in here. And so, if the eye of the hurricane, let's just use some locations here to show what impacts would actually look like. Let's say that the eye is something like that, right? So let's say it makes landfall right there. What you're going to see is a very sharp cutoff on the west side to the amount of wind that you'll receive. So let's say that this is 100-mile-per-hour hurricane. I'm not good at drawing this stuff here. So if it's 100-mile-per-hour hurricane, where do we receive 100 to gust to 115 is what we would be receiving. So where would that occur? Would essentially be right about here. So that's where the strongest wind would be. But then we would receive, 80 to 100, we'll say, with gusts to, low 100s will actually occur, and it'll stay fairly sharp over here on the right side, but you'll see it kind of go a lot stronger up here on the top side and be a little wider on the right side. So from this side of the eye over, you'll see a lot more wind, whereas, by the time you get to here, maybe right in here, it's tropical storm force or is much lower, so we're talking 50-mile-per-hour winds out here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that's populated. You mentioned that earlier. That's very populated in between Lafayette, Baton Rouge, and then even as close as New Orleans, that's a very populated area that could impact a lot of people.
For sure. So it'll be an area, again, it's all stuff that really needs to be watched really closely is where does it landfall, how strong. If it's 115, the stronger winds, they go further inland. So, you start talking about Baton Rouge getting much higher winds than what we were initially talking about. And you can see it here on radar. Look at the eye. Watch it just kind of pop out here in the last hour or so.
Yeah.
And just, it's spinning away. We're seeing lightning. Like, look at the lightning that's forming, especially up here in these bands. But even so, you see these lightning flashes. There's one right there over the center now. That means, it's intensifying. It's creating those cold cloud tops to make that lightning.
Absolutely. Well, and I think one of the interesting things, we may have mentioned this earlier about this, is we've seen some really decent convection from this already. Even before it was a tropical storm, we saw some really decent convection with this.
Yeah, as soon as it hit the Yucatan Peninsula, right? So, this wave, we've been watching it kind of come across like this, just as this tropical wave. And as soon as it got to about right here, it really began to fire a lot of convection. And it was kind of low chances. They just kept forecasting low chances while it was out here in the Caribbean. But as soon as this convection really fired right in through here, it was game on. They went immediately to the moderate with a high chance of forming, and then moved out here into the open water and was very quickly a potential tropical cyclone, which is a newer thing. It typically in the past we went tropical depression, tropical storm, and then hurricane, and now we have this what we call a PTC, potential tropical cyclone, and really all that is it's a way for the National Hurricane Center to say this is going to form.
Yeah.
We know it's going to form now. This is no longer an 80, 90. Like, this is 100% chance forming into at minimum a tropical depression. In this case, it went potential tropical cyclone with 50-mile-per-hour winds. So it already had 50-mile-per-hour winds in it. It just didn't have this nice low-level spin that you see right here in the center right now, which is, again, it's approaching a hurricane now. It didn't have this spin, right? So the spin
would have structure yet.
It would have been more like this was what the spin was.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like this nice little core.
And now we see something a lot more impressive. Yeah, a lot more textbook now than what we did 24 hours ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and I'm waiting to see if we'll get any tropical data. I don't think it's going to come in while we're on this call, but we actually have 2 flights going into Francine now. So here you can see this one is it's coming across right up here. Flew out of Tampa there. So it's on its way there. And then we've got a second flight that is taking off as well. I'm not sure where this one's taking off from. This one's taking off from going to be Biloxi. So coming out of Biloxi, Mississippi, and then dropping south. So they'll actually have 2 of these zigzagging across into the system. What's interesting too, so even all the tropical models, I was looking at this. I mean, look, they've got it initialized at 50 miles. Oh, wait, you got to switch my screen.
Yeah, do you want to switch your screens real quick?
Yeah.
We can see the tropical models. Yeah, I want to see where this is forecasted for, because I think that a lot of these models are in agreement of where this is going. It's going to go to the north, and it's going to take that shift back to the northeast, and that's how it's going to end up in Louisiana, even though it's kind of hugging the Mexican coast right now. Yeah,
I think they're definitely, within, now this matters if you're in Lake Charles or, but, for the most part, I mean, it's going to be coming close to Houston. So I would pay attention if I was in Houston, but I don't think it's going to make landfall in Houston. But if you're anywhere from like Beaumont right here, right on the Louisiana, Texas coast corner, and I mean, if it turned enough all the way. So, I mean, really, Houston low end, New Orleans low end, although New Orleans could have some pretty decent impacts from this. The onshore flow is going to be decent. And if we kind of look at some of these, I think we have some impact graphics here of what that would look like. So, your flooding risk, I mean, as we talked about the rain, I mean, look at this all the way. And look where all this is tracking too. So when the system passes New Orleans, they're not done.
Yeah.
So the rain stops, but it's still dumping rain up here to the north. And this is all the Mississippi River Valley. So all this water has to flow then back through New Orleans to get back out to the Gulf. So New Orleans gets all this rain, and then it continues to dump rain to the north that also has to flow back to the south through the system. So, you're going to continue to see impacts from that. But then you've got the storm surge. And I think these numbers are going to go up. So these are not where these are Cat 1 storm surge numbers for Louisiana. So Cat 2, Cat 3 are going to go up drastically. So I would expect these to go up into the 12 to 13 foot range here on the coast right here. And, probably 3 to 6 foot, 4 to 6 foot, something like that for the New Orleans area. But if the system gets bigger or it moves further east, it's all about that draw. So is it going to draw water into this kind of pouch right here? And if it landfalls here, it's one thing, but if it landfalls here, that draw is just straight into the bay here, into the Delta. And so New Orleans just really takes quite a hit there. So we're really going to have to watch that. Those are going to be really big things, but you can see that, I mean, this is the Euro model. I mean, look, everything is pretty much, I mean, there's one outlier here for Houston. Who knows what's going on with this guy right here. But for the most part, everything is just landfall right here. Where they're missing it, this is the GFS, kind of all the same thing here, right? So an outlier over here to New Orleans. But for the most part, everything it's pretty tight within a 50 to 100 mile stretch, essentially, of everything kind of making landfall there. So, for the most part, the one thing that they're missing on right now is the intensity. And that's it's because of where they're initializing. So, you're at 50 knots, so they're not quite up to where this is intensity wise. So, if you were to take it and put it up here and then say, where do we go? So everything would probably forecast a moderate Cat 2 hurricane to a low end Cat 3 hurricane. And that's kind of where I think we'll end up at. But the Gulf is tricky. It's so warm where it is right now, and there is no shear on this system right now. So with everything the way that it is right now, there's no reason why it couldn't just just go crazy. With that.
And that's what we see. I mean, from all major hurricanes, that rapid intensification is there, So if we see that, I think that we could easily get to moderate Cat 2, Cat 3, as you mentioned. Just for everyone who's watching live right now, I know we have several people watching live. If you do have any questions, we've got a few more minutes here while Derek can hang out with us. We've got 5 more minutes. So if you do have any questions, let us know. Put it in the comments section. Also, if you just want to share where you're watching from, let us know as well. We love to hear where people are watching from. We can kind of tailor the forecast to where people are watching from. For example, I was looking at rainfall models over the next day or two, and it looks like as this makes, or I guess 3 or 4 days, as this makes landfall, Oklahoma is going to miss out on almost all of that rain. Really looking dry for Oklahoma. All of that rain is going to stay, as you can see from that model there. It's going to stay to the east of us. But yeah, let us know where you're watching from on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and we can kind of talk about the impacts that means for your area as well.
Yeah, it's interesting on the rainfall how that works. I mean, if we look at it, it's so wherever the path is, to the left of it will be very little rain. So even it's like you can see Little Rock, Arkansas, right here in the center of the state of Arkansas, is in the cone, right? So potential that the system could go right over the top of them is what that says. But if it were to follow the dot down the center of the cone, Little Rock, Arkansas would probably get half an inch or an inch of rain from this. Like they wouldn't get hardly anything. But if you're right under that dot or to the east of it, I mean, you're talking 5 to 10 inches of rain, most likely. It's
such a different story.
Whole different story. So, and so along the coast, you've got hurricane warnings, I think, include Beaumont, all the way over. I'm not sure what city they actually list. We could actually see here. This should be in the public advisory here where they've got them to. So Grand Isle.
Okay.
Oh, that's the hurricane watch. I'm sorry. The hurricane warning is from the Louisiana coast to the Sabine Pass, eastward to Morgan City. So if you're in Morgan City, you're in the hurricane warning.
And they usually do hurricane warnings about 36 hours in advance, so before that landfall. So they're right on track with that here.
Yep, exactly what they wanted. So, and again, it's moving to the northwest at about 7 miles per hour. There's that 996 that we talked about. So that's how strong the low pressure is. When this becomes a hurricane, this will drop into the 980s. If it becomes a pretty strong hurricane, it'll be in the 970s or even the 960s. The big historic ones are 910. Even a few have gotten down into the 800s. So a whole 100 millibars lower. Just to put a little perspective to that.
You can tell. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, you can tell whenever a storm is strengthening, that number goes down, that pressure goes down. So that's a really important number to keep an eye on.
And it happens fast. When we talk about that rapid intensification, that happens really fast when it starts to do that. So, I mean, sometimes you'll see the plane pass through and it'll be 4 or 5 millibars down each time it goes through. And so sometimes the wind is a little bit lacking on that, but so you'll see the pressure drop but you won't see the wind go up sometimes for a few hours, and then all of a sudden the wind will go up after that. So
I see some people commenting where they're watching from Colorado on here. A few others on as well. So yeah, we appreciate everyone hopping on today. Okay, we do have just 1 more minute with you, Derek, here. So any final words, final forecasts before we head out?
I think, just again, pay attention to it. We could see this. I think it should be a hurricane tonight. It may even be, I've seen it could go to a Cat 2 hurricane tonight, or even stronger. So it's definitely going to need to be watched very, very closely. If you're on the Louisiana coast, like I said, really from Houston to New Orleans, you've got to watch it. But really from Lake Charles over to Morgan City. That's the area that I would really focus and kind of hone in on right now. That's the way things look, and kind of the way that I'll approach this for everybody going forward. If we have just a nasty hurricane, I think we do an update again tomorrow, which I think is possible. And then we'll do updates again on Wednesday as well as we near landfall, which I think right now, what did it say on there? They're forecasting, let's see if I can find too many tabs open. I'm sure others can relate.
Understand. Yeah, I think it was Wednesday.
At 1 p.m. on Wednesday. So Wednesday afternoon now is our forecasted landfall. So not too late. It's actually sped up some. It's been at times it's been as late as Thursday morning. So we'll see what time landfall is, but we'll do an update again on Wednesday too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, oh, hang on. Oh, wait, there we go. Okay, yes. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. We appreciate everyone watching. This will be up, so if you want to go back and see any of that forecast that you may have missed, you can always go back and rewatch this as many times as you want. You can pause it, you can rewind it and see that forecast. But as Derek mentioned, we will be doing another update within the next day or two as this hurricane, tropical storm right now, expected to become hurricane, is expected to make landfall. So we hit that follow button. We will be doing more updates within the coming days. Derek, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you hopping on here.
Absolutely. It's fun. Thanks, Taylor.